This weekend has some absolutely massive South African schoolboy rugby fixtures, and there are a few games that could have a huge impact on how people view the top teams in the country right now. We have a few traditional rivalries, a few players pushing hard for SA Schools honours, and perhaps even a couple of more surprises on the cards. So without any further ado, let's get into it. First up is Stellenberg against Paul Roos. Last time these two teams met, Paul Roos won comfortably 34-5 in what was a very one-sided affair. But a lot has changed since then, and Stellenberg have become one of the success stories of the season so far. They were ranked 11th in South Africa last year, but this season they have already beaten Paarl Gim and Great College, which tells you this is no longer a side that people can overlook. I think their biggest strength right now is probably their confidence, because beating teams such as Paarl Gim and Great College gives a team a huge amount of self-belief. And Stellenberg no longer look like a team hoping to win big matches, but rather like a team believing they can win them. Their physicality up front is another huge weapon, because they have tough, hard-working forwards that can compete at scrum time, dominate mauls, win breakdown battles, and consistently get over the gain line. And against Great College in particular, their maul was awesome, and I honestly cannot remember the last time I saw a Grey Pack being mauled like that. Finally, their defense also seems solid, because they seem to be able to absorb pressure, stay disciplined, and keep their shape for long periods, no matter how many phases the opposition seems to string together, which is one of the main reasons they have managed to beat teams like Paarl Gym and Great College. Now, I think this weekend many people will have their eyes on Ethan from Bouillon, because they believe he's currently the best fly-off in South African schoolboy rugby. So I think his battle with Travis Pfeiffer should be fascinating. Then there is also Lockie van Burden. When he played against Great College, he was absolutely instrumental in Stellenberg's forwards dominance, especially around maul time, so it'll be interesting to see what he can produce this weekend as well. Now, Paul Roos, meanwhile, they were ranked 5th in the country last year and have already picked up impressive wins over Affies and Monument this season. They started the year brilliantly, although they perhaps took their foot off the gas a little bit against Monument and maybe did not play to their full potential against Pretoria Boys, but they still managed somehow to produce some outstanding rugby. I think their biggest strength right now is probably their attack and their ability to play fast 15-man rugby. They seem very comfortable moving the ball around, using both forwards and backs, and create pressure through speed and precision rather than brute force alone. And I think what makes them particularly dangerous is that they have the patience to build phases, and then suddenly strike when the space opens up. Their pack is also another major asset, because they are aggressive, hardworking, and give the backs a strong platform to attack off. And even when they've had a few set-piece issues this season, they still seem to able to absorb pressure and often come out on top physically. Defensively, they also look tough this year, because a few times this year they have shown that they can stay calm and composed under relentless pressure, even when momentum shifted, like in the game they had against Affies. Now, as mentioned previously, I think a lot of people will be watching Travis Pfeiffer and his battle with Ethan from Bouillon closely, while Leon Barnard could also have plenty of attention on him this weekend, since many people consider him the best hooker in South African schoolboy rugby. Now, as for my prediction, Paul Roos are playing brilliant rugby this year, and once they build momentum, they are incredibly difficult to stop. But Stellenberg have shown by beating Paarl Gym and Great College that they are no longer dark horses, and they are genuine contenders. So because of my respect for what they have achieved so far, and because they have home ground advantage, I'm going to go against my traditional bias and deep respect I have for Paul Roos, and I'm going to back Stellenberg to edge this one by 3 points. Next up is Paarl Boys against Oakdale in Paarl. And the last time these two teams met in Riversdale, Oakdale came out on top 28 points to 26. Now, Paarl Boys, they were ranked number 1 in South Africa last year, and their biggest wins so far this season have come against Outeniqua and against Jeppe. Now, against Outeniqua, they had to dig very deep to get the win, while against Jeppe at Noordside, they looked solid. Now, I think one of Paarl Boys' biggest strength over the last few years is their ability to generally dominate collisions that really seems to wear teams down over 70 minutes. Game management is another big strength of theirs, because they look calm in big matches, they make smart decisions, they kick well, and they know exactly when to play direct and when to spread the ball wide. And then also mentally, they seem very, very tough. For example, against Outeniqua, they fought very, very hard to win in the last minute after trailing for the whole match. And against Garsfontein, they showed tremendous character to come back from a big deficit to take the lead late in the match. And I think this is because of Paarl Boys' Paarl Boys highs, culture of winning, the high standards that they have, and the big match experience that they have, which helps them stay composed in pressure situations and gives them that little mental edge over many of the teams they play against. Now, as for players to watch in this game, a lot of players have put their hands up for higher honors at Noordside and Easter festivals, and scrum-offs like Rufagon Hendricks, Morne Noble, Luke Doyle have all impressed. So I think many people will be keeping a close eye on Liam de Villiers at scrum-off to see how he performs, while their whole pack will also come under scrutiny because they're arguably coming up against the best, if not one of the best packs in the whole country. Now, next up is Oakdale, and last year they were ranked number 6 in South Africa. They've beaten Noordheuvel this year, but unfortunately, they've lost their big games against Affies and Grey College this season. But even so, they should definitely not be underestimated because they also have some serious strengths in their side. First of all is their scrum. Their scrum is extremely strong, and they usually dominate, outmuscle, and strangle their opponents, just like we saw against Affies at Noordside. Then they also have big, powerful ball carriers, such as Augustine at 120 kilograms and de Villiers at 104 kilograms, that seems to give them strong go-forward ball and give their backs some nice ball to attack off. And then finally, given their traditional size and physicality of their forwards, if teams are not prepared for that challenge and don't step up to the plate, it can really start to wear them down later on in the game. Now, many people are saying that Jaco de Villiers is currently the best number 8 in South Africa right now. So I think there will be a lot of focus on him to see whether that is still true. And I think there will also be a lot of interest in Dean Augustine, who is reportedly carrying an injury and might not even be playing this weekend. And finally, there's also the debate around Adrian Smith and Leon Barnard as to who the best hooker in South African schoolboy rugby is. And I think a strong performance against Paarl Boys could certainly strengthen Adrian Smith's case. Now, this is a very tough game to call because Oakdale's pack is so strong and demands respect. However, given the home field advantage for Paarl Boys, their recent results, and also the strength of the opposition that they have faced compared to Oakdale, I think I'm going to have to back Paarl Boys to take this one by 5 points. Finally, we get to the Affies versus Paarl Gym game. Now, the last time these two teams met, the score was 16-0, and many people expect another close game between these two. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is that this will be Affies' 5th game in only 14 days, which is remarkable, but they will have to be ready because Paarl Gym really look like one of the strongest teams in the country right now. Now, Affies were ranked 4th in South Africa last year and have already beaten Oakdale and Waterkloof this season, while they also gave Grey High a proper hiding with solid forward play and dangerous running from their backs. However, they've also lost to Paul Roos and Michaelhaus, which was arguably one of the biggest upsets of the season so far. Now, for Affies, I think their outside backs look extremely dangerous because Gous, Brink, Van Staden and even Venter are all dangerous runners who can punish teams if given space. Their mauls has also been very strong throughout the season, and although it could have been better against Paul Roos, overall it has been solid and produced some excellent tries against Waterkloof and Grey High. Playing at home in Pretoria is also a huge advantage for Affies because Affie Guts always seems to peak when they're at home. Now, I think people will be looking at the entire Affies forward pack this weekend because without the platform that the forward pack lays, all of the danger in the backline becomes far less effective. Now, moving on to Paarl Gym. Paarl Gym, they were ranked 2nd in South Africa last year, and this will actually be their first game against a top 10 school this season. They've beaten Durbanville, they've beaten Noordheuvel, and they've beaten Menlo Park, but they unfortunately lost to Stellenberg earlier in the season. Now, I think their biggest strengths at the moment is probably their mobility, their line out, and their attacking shape. Now, with regards to their forwards, they are powerful, but they're also mobile. They're not just about brute force, but their loose forwards in particular are very effective in open play and help the team play at a very high tempo. Then their line-out looks very, very strong, while their maul has also been highly effective so far this season, and they've scored some really good tries off it. Finally, their attacking shape is also excellent because they play with a lot of width, they have good support lines, and they use their handling skills well, both forwards and back, which means they can keep possession for long periods, and they tend to tire out big physical packs like Affies. Now, I think a lot of people will be interested to see how Paarl Gim's loose forward scope with the traditional bigger Affies pack, but I think Van Zyl at number 8 is definitely one to watch, as well as the battle between Ethan Barker and Estienne Marks in the back line. Now, as for a prediction for this game, Affies really look determined and strong against Grey High, and I usually would lean towards them because of the home field advantage. But with Affies playing their 5th game in 14 days, and Paarl Gim being fresh and rested, I think Paarl Gim will take this one by 8 points, although I sincerely hope Affies can pull off a win for their supporters who are hurting big time after their shock loss to Michael House last weekend. Now, outside of these 3 big games, there are also a few other matches around the country worth keeping an eye on. In the Western Cape, I think I'll definitely be watching the Outeniqua game because I really want to see more of Rufagon Hendricks, who really impressed me at Noordstate and is pushing hard for Cravenique and possibly SA school selection, in my opinion. And then there's also Caleb Bell from Ronnebosch, another player who I find very interesting because it reminds me a little of a mix between Cheslin Colby and JC Mars, just because of his versatility and also his attacking ability. In Gauteng, we've already spoken about Affies versus Paarl Gim, but the Jeppe versus Kes is another big derby worth watching, and I think Jeppe supporters in particular will be desperate to see an improved performance from Jeppe after such a strong start to the season, but a few inconsistent performances since then. I think 2 players to keep an eye on in this match is the 2 Flyers who've really impressed me over Easter festivals. They look pretty good. And then staying in the Gauteng region, I'll definitely think I'll also be keeping an eye on the Menlo Park game because, as you know, in one of my previous videos, I mentioned a player by the name of Dani Botma, the outside centre of Menlo Park, who really made a name for himself at Noordstate. And another player I'll be looking at is Alexander Giesel from Waterkloof, who is full of running and always looking to counter-attack. Then going to the KZN Eastern Cape region, a big match there. I think the pick of the bunch from the ones over here will be the Northwood versus Westville game. Now, to be honest, I haven't watched Northwood play that many times this season. I think I've watched them twice, watched the game against St Andrews, and they definitely have some quality in their team, very talented players, and I hear a lot of people saying that this could be one of Northwood's best teams in the last couple of years. However, the team from KZN that I've watched most is Westville. I watched them against Hilton, I watched them against Maritzburg, I watched them against Framesby, and I also watched their game, the last game that they played at the Kunsni Festival, and I must say, I really, really enjoy watching them. They've just got so much talent in their side, and they always look dangerous, powerful, and at times just like they're playing sevens with the way that they offload and dance their way around defenders. And I think players that you can keep an eye out on the Westville side, definitely Mlaba, Makanya, the 8th man, Koopman, Afrikaner, Sonkononkono, and Sejadu. They just continue to impress me each time I watch them play. And if you haven't seen some of their tries, you can check out my shorts. I've posted a few of those tries on there. Then moving on to another game in the Eastern Cape is the Graham College game. I think a lot of people have taken notice of Graham College, particularly after their performances at St John's, especially Michal, who has scored 10 tries in his last 3 games. And if he plays this weekend, I have a very strong feeling that he's going to extend that record even further. Okay, finally in the Free State and Northern Cape, Grey College have a deserved rest this week, but Diamantveld are still a team worth keeping an eye on after some very strong performances so far this season. Remember, they've also beaten Monument, and they've also got some very talented players in players like Brits, their outside centre, who really run some beautiful lines in the back line. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, that's the wrap for this week's fixtures and predictions. There are some massive games on schedule, plenty of SA schools battles taking place across the country, and a few teams with a real chance to prove that they belong among the very best. Let me know in the comments who you think will win these big games and which player you think is going to come out on top this weekend. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Enjoy the rugby this weekend.